Now, Positively Ernie with Ernie Anastos, a New York TV legend and radio host with great positive stories and interviews.
Thanks, Ernie. You're the best.
And now, here's Ernie.
Hey, everybody, we're back and so happy to be here because, this is a program that I really enjoy doing, and I get a lot of good feedback, too, by the way, because we talk about positive things, how we can help each other, how we can help ourselves. And I've got a great guest today because he is just one of the most interesting people you want to know. His name is Dr. Jeff Gurian. Take a look at him. He's a character. You look fantastic on camera. You really do.
Really? Thanks.
No,
you
really.
So. I was fixing my hair. I'm just wondering. Yeah, thank you.
But you're unique. You just have a personality that just jumps out. Dr. Jeff Gurian has done a lot of things. First of all, he's a dentist. A lot of people think doctor, he's written books, maybe he's a psychologist, but you're a dentist. That's how you started.
I spent 20 years on the board of the Association for Spirituality and Psychotherapy. I explained my work to psychotherapists, to a Henry Grayson, who founded the National Institute of the Psychotherapies. And he accepted my work and made me part of the board for 20 years. And I wound up lecturing to psychologists about what I do, about taking away physical pain caused by stress using just energy from your hands.
You know what? You have so many things to talk about. People should know that, okay, you're a dentist. But aside from that, you're a comedy writer. You've done stand-up comedy. You work with so many comedians. And you have a wonderful gift for wanting to help others. Now, we're talking about mental health, whether it's this month or any month. It's important that we really take care of ourselves. Now, let's talk about that. Why did you find early on how important it was to get involved in helping others with their challenges, with their fears, their problems? I mean, these books that you've written, we'll go through them. First, Fight the Fear. Fight the Fear. Why did you write this book?
I've been fighting fear all my life, Ernie, and it's something that a lot of people don't like to admit, but I admit it easily because I think it affects a lot of people. I think a lot of people, especially these days, but as a child, I was a very sensitive child. And I remember being very afraid of the dark. And something in my nature hated the fact that I was afraid, and it made me confront my fear. And I remember making myself go into a dark room to show myself that there was nothing to be afraid of. I must have been
You did this on your own.
I did it on my own.
That's great.
But, look, I had an unusual experience. I had a recurrent nightmare that one of my grandmothers was leaving me, and a very loving grandmother was leaving me in a very scary place. And it bothered me so much that one night in my dream, I said to her, "You're not my grandmother, this is just a dream." And I've told that to psychiatrists, and they said to me, for a child to do that is amazing. You must have had an amazing control over your mind. So I started stuttering when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I stuttered through my 20s and beyond. Even into my 30s, I was still blocking on certain words.
Was there something that set off that problem?
Yeah, and I work with stutterers, and I always say it's not important to know exactly why you started stuttering, but it's important to look at all the possibilities. Because we start speaking when we're 2. I'm speaking fine for 5 years, and all of a sudden I start to stutter. So it has to do with how I'm responding to something in my environment.
So it's an emotional reaction.
I feel it's an emotional and psychological, because if it was genetic, I wouldn't have been able to cure myself. And I wouldn't be able to help other people that I work with. So to me, it's a fascinating thing. It's situational. If you're really nervous, if you're in an uncomfortable situation, you stutter more. But I realized one day I didn't stutter when I was alone, Ernie. I could go into a room by myself and speak perfectly, and which affects a lot of stutterers. That's the criterion that I use when I'm going to choose to work with somebody or not. Because a true disability exists. It doesn't depend on who's in the room with you, right? If a man has a limp, he limps in every room of his house. He can't go into a room and close the door and walk perfectly. But if I could speak better when I'm alone, then theoretically it means that there's nothing wrong with me. And anything I create in my mind, if I created it, I can uncreate it. That's the concept.
You have figured this all out for yourself.
Yeah.
Have you had therapy? Have people helped you out?
Not really. I had to work it out on my own, and I was very lucky that I was able to do that. So I wrote this book about fear because I have so many. Because I was diagnosed by a neurologist with ADHD as an adult. About 10, 15 years ago, maybe even more. I found the report recently, and I remember him saying to me, the degree that you have, you must have had to work 10 times as hard as everyone else. And I graduated number 54 out of 126
Wow.
in my class. And I did have to work as hard as everyone else because I battled all kinds of confusion. And confusion leads to fear. So it gave me fears of traveling. And so because I confront my fear, in 2019, I went to Japan all by myself.
Really?
It was the scariest thing I could think of to do.
Because that was a challenge for you?
It was such a challenge. I have a fascination with Japanese culture. I studied Japanese a little bit at the Japan Center. 2 years in a row, a friend was supposed to go with me, and both times he couldn't go. And I said, you know what? I'm going alone. I'm not going to let it stop me. When I go
Good
to the
for you.
airport, the airport's filled with millions of people who are traveling. If they can do it, I have to be able to do it. That's what I tell
Wonderful.
myself.
Yeah.
Not something like skydiving where there's real danger involved, but the things that other people can do,
Yeah.
I have to be
What you
able
would
to
call
do them
normal
too.
activities.
Normal
Yeah,
activities.
yeah.
My fear is a bully, Ernie. Fear tells you that you'll never be successful, that you can't achieve your goals, that you'll never be what you want to be. And it's not a valid thought. And the reason I wrote my first book called Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind is because we're holding thoughts that are not valid for us.
Yeah.
In my case, I was holding thoughts that told me that I needed to stutter, that there was something wrong with me. I gave myself a false disability for no reason that didn't exist. I was holding myself back. I remember as a kid in school, I would make believe I didn't know the answer. The teacher would call on me and I would say, I don't know. I knew the answer, but I didn't want the other kids to feel bad. That
You're amazing to tell that story. How old were you when that happened?
in high school.
Wow.
In high school, and
you
also
say
in-
you didn't want other kids to feel bad because you knew the answer?
and they might not know the answer. So I would
what was
rather
the
make
reasoning
myself
there?
less
Yeah.
than.
Right?
I would rather make myself look less than, which in my mind is what stuttering does. Stuttering, if I'm talking to you and I'm stuttering for you, I'm stuttering to you. And I'm saying, I'm not as good as you, Ernie. And I'll show you because I have a disability. So what I had to do is I had to take what must have been an inferiority complex. And I don't know why I had that, because I was supposedly popular. But I was only 16 in college. I went to school very young. So I told myself, I made myself run for the president of the freshman class of Hunter College. And I didn't know most of the kids. It was a big school that fed in from 7 different high schools. I only knew kids from my school. And I was supposedly popular. I was voted. When I went to school, they did prettiest girl, handsomest guy, best
Sure.
athlete,
Yeah,
stuff like
I remember
that.
all that.
I was voted most talented because I played the piano and the drums.
Yeah.
And I sang. So theoretically, I was popular, but I didn't feel it. I felt like an outsider, like I didn't fit in. And I make myself run for president, and I tell myself, if I could win the election, I won't have to stutter anymore because it'll show me that people like me, because I think I had a feeling that I didn't fit in.
You know, Jeff, I've
But
got
I won the election, and I
you
still
won it.
stuttered. Yeah, I was the president of the whole freshman class, and I still stuttered. And that was a great lesson. I just want to finish that thought.
Sure.
It was a great lesson because it taught me that outside validation doesn't work, Ernie. It doesn't matter how many people tell you you're fantastic and wonderful. It matters what you think of yourself. And that started my journey to curing myself.
You know, people who are watching and listening, I'm sure they're saying the same thing that I'm going to say. Who influenced you to be able to have this kind of perspective, this kind of viewpoint on life, for a very young person to be sensitive to the needs of others, to be thinking about how you can cure yourself, how you can challenge yourself, how you can overcome a fear, a problem? That's extraordinary. Jeffrey, that's extraordinary. So
Thank you.
who were the influences? Family, friends, counselors, yourself? Where was the greatest source of support?
You know, it's such a great question. I had a very loving and supportive family, but I was the first person that ever graduated from college. My family was in the liquor business and in the garment center. There was nobody. But when I was 12 years old, I decided what I was going to be. And to me, as a thought now, it's very strange
Pretty
for
good.
a child to know what they want to be.
Yeah.
I was 12 years old. I decided I wanted to be a doctor, but I was too sensitive to handle life and death, and I was wearing braces. And I said, you know what? I'll be a dentist, and I'll make people look beautiful. And I was already writing comedy. At 12 years old, I was writing comedy. And it used to bother me. I would lay in bed thinking, well, I want to be a dentist, but you can't do both. How can you do comedy and be a dentist? And somehow I made that happen.
An interesting combination.
It's a very bizarre
Yeah.
thing. Most 12-year-olds, they want to be a fireman, a policeman or something, and they change their mind as they get older. I never changed my mind.
Well, this is what I mean about being unique, that at that stage of your life, 12 years old, deciding you want to be a dentist, and why you chose that path, but also writing comedy. Now, just to divert a little bit, you write comedy. You've written all kinds of material for a lot of celebrities.
For some of the biggest stars, yeah.
Tell me about the people that you've written for, and where's the inspiration to write comedy?
I look at the world as a funny place. I see humor in almost everything, which is really hard to do these days. But while I was in practice, I was writing for Rodney Dangerfield and Joan Rivers and Richard Belzer and Gilbert Gottfried and Andrew Dice Clay. Well, you know why? I didn't want to look like a novelty. If you remember Ed Sullivan, he used to have plate spinners and a knife-throwing act. I don't want to be a knife-throwing act. I'm like, I didn't even tell people about my other career. Joan Rivers called me one morning from Las Vegas. She's like, what do you do during the day? I said, I work. She goes, well, obviously, what is it that you do? Because all the TV shows did stories about my multiple careers. And something had come out. There was a New York Times article, a cover story in the style section of the New York Times about me, with people on Broadway. So I said to her, is this concerning the vicious rumor going around that I'm a dentist? And she said, why didn't you tell me? And I said, because nobody hires you in show business because you're a dentist. They hire you in spite of the fact, you know? It's not exactly a prerequisite.
But you know, your passion for humor and your creative ability has been very helpful in many ways, because you've used that comedy to help others overcome their problems. You've used comedy for better mental health. Explain that to us. How does it apply? I think I know, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, what's interesting to me is that when you find your true path, the universe tends to support you in that, and it brings things into your life. Last week, I hosted a big event for mental illness, benefiting NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, out on Long Island, and it was co-produced by an interesting group called Healing Headbands Project, where they go to hospitals to visit sick children, and they take the art from these sick children and they make them into headbands and wristbands. They believe that laughter creates healing. And so I was asked to be the host of the big comedy show out on Long Island. I'm doing an event. I'm the keynote speaker. July 18th, they're flying me out to Minneapolis to be the keynote speaker at the Minneapolis Convention Center for the Academy of General Dentistry. Talking about, the topic is how to survive a career in dentistry using positive thinking and humor.
Oh, it's a great topic for you.
They know my background, and there's a whole video up front showing me with the celebrities, and when I used to teach at NYU, I spent 12 years at NYU in oral medicine and orofacial pain.
Wow.
And my specialty was taking away headaches from people who grind their teeth. In this country, and this is important, and I'm glad to have an opportunity to say it, in this country alone, there's more than 150 million people who suffer with what they think are migraine headaches that are really musculoskeletal headaches caused by clenching and grinding the teeth. TMJ, right? Because we live in a very stressful world.
And people, you're not even aware that you're doing it.
Not even aware.
When you're sleeping.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so even people who've ground their teeth down so short, they still, some of them insist they don't grind their teeth. It's a body, mind, spirit approach. Well, what I used to do is I would use energy from my hands to release the muscles. That's what I'm lecturing on. I call it STAR therapy. I developed a technique, STAR. It stands for spiritual, transformational, affirmative, resonance therapy.
Wow.
The resonance refers to music because it's like a guided meditation, which is another crazy story. Do you know who Stephen Halpern is, the father of New Age music?
Yes.
I have a guided meditation with him. I wrote him a letter 20 years ago. When I was at NYU, I used music.
And so many things.
I use music to help people because we absorb the music. And I wrote to him and I said, your music has helped me help so many people with physical pain. And I never heard from him for 20 years. He never saw the letter.
Really?
Now he's working on his memoirs, and he finds the letter, and I come home one day, and there's a message. He goes, I'm calling in reference to a letter you sent me 20 years ago. And he said he was so moved by my letter that he wanted to put music to my words.
Fascinating.
And now I have a guided meditation with Stephen Halpern. It's called Journey to Your Heart. because what I do, I call it heart-centered work, to release heart wounds. Since we're children, every time someone hurts your feelings or breaks a promise to you, or breaks up with you in a relationship, does anything to hurt you, it stays inside of us in our heart chakra, and I call them heart wounds. And it affects your self-esteem, it affects your self-confidence, and it affects every decision you make.
Okay, so how do we help ourselves?
Knowledge is power. To be able to, well, if they read, it's not a one-sentence answer. It's a process. It took me many years to evolve to answer these questions. I addressed them in the book, releasing the heart wounds, talking about it. You gave me credit for acknowledging that I deal with fear all the time.
Sure.
Most people hide these things. They don't release them. Our traumatic events are very deeply ingrained in our consciousness, more so than the happy events. If I asked you, and I won't ask you to tell them, but I'm sure that you remember uncomfortable events in your life.
Sure, when you were a
we
kid.
all do. And anytime someone says something to hurt
Somebody
you,
bullies you and so forth, you always
especially
remember
a lot
that.
of children were
Absolutely.
bullied.
Yeah.
We remember those easier than remembering the happy times. The traumatic events stay lodged deeper, and until we can come to grips with those
it's like
things.
Most people remember the bad news rather than the good news.
Than the good news. And that bad news, those heart wounds give us thoughts that are not valid. So we make bad decisions in our lives. So it's the reason why you keep getting the same bad job over and over again, the same bad relationship over and over again. We're making bad choices, and the only common denominator is you. You're the one who keeps showing up in all these relationships. So if they're not working out, it's because you're making bad choices based on faulty thinking.
So Jeffrey, let me ask you this.
Go ahead.
Because, you've got an incredible mind. You're able to really think through so much in many different ways with a different perspective. Now, someone listening to your stories is saying, I want to hear more from this guy. But the books that you've written 8 books.
8 books.
We didn't talk about this facing adversity, which is the same idea of the general topic.
Overcoming obstacles.
Overcoming obstacles. So if someone says, okay, just give me a capsule, give me a little summary of how I should handle myself if I'm having problems with adversity, my heart pain, fighting fear, whatever it happens to be, what should I think about? Give me just give me 5 steps that I should follow that will really help me out.
Well, it would be hard to put them into 5 steps, but I would say one of the phrases that I use in my book is that you can't change your past. The only thing you could change is your perspective of your past, which is very important. Because there are some people, if you ask them about their childhood, it's the reason why you can have siblings that are completely different people. And if you ask them about their childhood, you'd think they had different parents because their interpretation of what happened is very different. It's like when you ask somebody to describe a crime scene, you could ask 5 people. They all saw something different, even though they were there. Our perspective changes.
Right.
So it's important that the spiritual aspect is important, and I'll explain that briefly. Spirituality is very different than religion. Religion can be wonderful for people, but it tends to divide us because it puts you in a category, and other people are outside the category. It's labeling. Spirituality brings the whole world together.
Exactly.
Because all it asks is that you believe in a force greater than yourself, and you could call it nature, the universe, God, whatever is comfortable for you, as long as you know it isn't you, because when you think that you're ruling everything in your life, you tend to blame yourself when things don't go the way you would like them to. I don't even say when things go wrong, because I've had things that I thought went wrong that turned out to be something really good afterwards, because I'm a human being. I don't have the perspective to see into the future. I can only evaluate what's happening to me in the moment, and I think, oh, this is horrible. I had a flat tire that saved my life. And I was...
Really?
Yeah, and I still carry that little piece of metal in there. I was going away for a weekend with somebody I really wanted to spend time with. And when the garage guy brought my car around, it was making a weird noise from a tire. And I'm like, what's up? He goes, I think you have a flat tire, but I don't see anything. And I'm like, this is a very bad omen. I can't tell this woman that I have a flat tire. It's not a good way to start a weekend together. Sorry, I have a flat tire, right? No. So I decided, in my insanity, I wasn't going to tell her that I'm going to try to drive out to the Hamptons. Maybe I'll get a flat tire on the road. Maybe I'll make it. I don't know. But then I came to my senses and I said, this is not a good thing to do. So I call the AAA. They give me a garage to go to, and I pull in, and I see the guy, and I immediately judge him. I go, this guy's not going to help me. And I'm so wrong, because he says to me, I'm sorry, we're too busy. I can't help you, but I have a friend nearby, and I'm going to call him, and I'm going to ask him to see you. So I pull up to this garage, and it's like a garage from heaven. They're waiting for me, and they put me up on the lift. And after a few minutes, one of the men calls me over who's working on my car. He goes, you see this piece of metal? This was what caused your problem. It's in your tire. He says, I'll have it fixed in a few minutes, and you'll be back on the road. A few minutes later, he calls me over, and he's all shook. And he says to me, I have to show you this. He goes, you see this rod? He goes, I know you don't know what this is, but this rod controls your steering. And it was about to slip out.
Oh.
And he goes, you're so lucky you got that flat tire.
Lost control?
You would have lost control of your car on the road. You could have been killed.
That's what saved you.
That's what saved
tire,
me,
that
and I
flat
keep
tire,
that little
you keep
piece
that
of
as a
metal,
reminder.
and I'll be bringing it when I lecture at Omega. I'm doing Omega in September, a whole weekend. I bring it with me to share that story,
Jeffrey,
that you're not a judge of what happens to you.
You're fascinating. I mean, I could continue talking for another hour. There's a wonderful quote. You talked about spirituality, and there's a quote that I subscribe to in many ways. Do you want to be a host to your creator, or do you want to be a hostage to your ego?
Oh, that's beautiful.
And when you really think about the depth of that thought, are you going to recognize, and as you pointed out, spirituality, recognize that, come on, all of this came from a source, a loving source, a source that we don't have the capability to totally understand in many ways. But the source is there, and it's love, and it's all the good things that we see, all the good things that happen in this world. And to me, that's where your life should be. But when people become a hostage to their ego and think about the material world, think about themselves, you lose a total perspective of reality. You're not living at the highest level of consciousness. And to me, that is what it's all about. I live that way. I know you do. And I know a lot of people out there saying, hey, I'm with you. And there's nothing wrong for standing up to that. It doesn't mean that you have to bully somebody or force somebody to think the way you do. But the truth shall set you free. And I like that.
You become a power of example. And this is why what you do is so important. You're the epitome of this. You're a living example of leading your life this way.
Trying to.
Which is why I'm always so happy to do stuff with you.
You're a delight.
And you know, it's what we do is so difficult because, as you said, spirituality is a lack of ego, basically. And the entertainment business is all about ego. Jackie Mason once said to me, when you go in to buy a shirt, the guy just gives you the shirt. He doesn't give you a shirt and a picture of himself and say, this is what I do and this is who I am and all. But in this business, you're always telling people what you do. This is my product. This is where I'm going to be. And it's very hard to create the balance of humility. Humility is very important to realize that this is all a gift. You know?
Amazing.
I've been able to accomplish a lot. Look, since I don't stutter, you can't even shut me up, Ernie. I don't stop talking.
You're great.
But you know, humility is very important, and to realize that it's all a gift from above.
Absolutely.
You know?
Jeffrey, will you come back again?
I'll come back every day if you want, Ernie.
I think you're great.
I love this with you. This is
I
amazing.
Love this. I think people who are listening and watching are saying, I really appreciate this man, because you're from the heart. You know, you're not thinking about anything from a piece of paper. It's all coming from your soul. It's coming from your experience. It's coming from who you are. Congratulations. I mean, all your books and all the things you're doing now, good luck on all the programs that are coming up this summer. I want you to come back.
I definitely will, Ernie. I'll be here anytime you want me.
Dr. Jeffrey Gurian, remember that name, remember that face. He's a great guy, and I thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. It's my honor to be on with you.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time.